Imagine for a moment that you are standing on the ramparts of a hive city. The air is thick with the acrid taste of promethium and the copper tang of fear. You are a guardsman, well-trained, disciplined, holding a lasgun that suddenly feels no heavier than a child's toy. You are waiting for the enemy, but before you see them, you feel them. The ground beneath your boots begins to tremble, a rhythmic, tectonic shudder that rattles your teeth. It is not an earthquake, it is the footsteps of millions. Then comes the sound. It starts as a low thrum on the horizon, a baritone vibration that presses against your chest. Slowly, it resolves into a roar. It is a sound that defies nature, a cacophony of roaring engines, crude metal clashing, and millions of throats screaming in a unison of bestial ecstasy. It is the sound of a war. And in that moment, the internet memes, the jokes about DACA, and the caricatures of Cockney accents dissolve into nothingness. You realize with a sinking cold in your gut that you are not facing a comedic relief. You are standing in the path of a biological avalanche. This is the horrifying reality of the Orks. In the lore of Warhammer 40,000, few factions are as misunderstood as the Greenskins. To the outside observer, they can seem chaotic, almost humorous in their anarchy. But to the citizen of the Imperium, they are the apocalypse made flesh. They are a species that does not just wage war, they are war. They are the galaxy's most successful biological weapon, a pestilence that cannot be cured, only burned. Today, on Silent Imperium, we strip away the humor. We are going to dig into the wet fungal horror of orc biology. We will dissect the metaphysical nightmare of the war energy that bends reality to the will of madmen. We will show you what happens when the green tide crashes against the walls of humanity, and why, in the grim darkness of the far future, the most terrifying sound you can hear is not the whisper of a demon, but the joyful bellow of a billion Xenos calling for your death. To understand the terror of the Orks, you must first discard your understanding of biology. Humans, Eldar, even the Tau, we are creatures of flesh and blood, bound by the fragile limitations of our organs. If you sever a human's arm, they go into shock. If you pierce a heart, the machine stops. Orks are different. They are not merely animals. They are a symbiotic miracle of fungal and animal engineering, created by the Old Ones for a war so ancient that even the stars have forgotten it. An orc is an ecosystem contained within a single skin. Their blood is actually a nutrient-rich fungal soup, carrying algae and spores that constantly repair and rebuild their physiology. This is why they are so notoriously difficult to kill. A lasgun shot that would blow a hole in a human chest merely pisses an orc off. Their pain threshold is practically non-existent because their nervous system is dampened, wired not for self-preservation, but for aggressive sustainability. They do not feel pain as a warning to stop. They feel it as a stimulus to fight harder. Consider the nightmare of fighting an enemy that does not understand it is dead. There are reports from the Astra Militarum of orcs continuing to strangle a guardsman even after being decapitated. The brain is gone, severed from the spine, but the muscle memory, the fungal instinct to kill remains active for minutes. You can shoot them, burn them, and blast them apart, but unless you destroy them on a cellular level, you are merely spreading their spores. Every drop of blood shed by an orc releases reproductive spores into the soil. In the act of killing them, you are ensuring the birth of their replacements. You are not fighting an army. You are fighting a cancer that walks, breathes and carries a chopper. This is the ultimate biological horror, an enemy that reproduces through its own violent death. This fungal nature explains their monstrous physique. They are slabs of green muscle that grow larger and stronger the more they fight. A standard orc boy towers over a human, but a knob or a war boss is a hulking behemoth of hardened flesh that can shrug off bolt shells. Their physiology is so robust that orc docs, their version of medics, can reattach severed limbs with rusty staples and a staple gun, and the limb will function perfectly within days. It is a mockery of medical science, a crude, dirty resilience that makes the fragile human form look pathetic by comparison. If their biology is disturbing, their psychic presence is an affront to reality itself. We call it the WAAAGH. Most assume this is simply their war cry, a word they scream as they charge. It is infinitely more than that. The WAAAGH is a gestalt psychic field generated by the collective subconscious of every orc in proximity. It is a resonating frequency of pure, unadulterated aggression. Imagine a psychic web connecting millions of minds all focused on a singular intent: violence. This field lubricates the friction of reality. It allows their technology, which by all rights should be piles of scrap metal, to function. A shooter works not because of precision engineering, but because the orc believes it works. A red vehicle moves faster simply because the collective orc psyche believes that red ones go faster. This is not magic in the traditional sense. It is the imposition of madness onto physics. But for you, the human soldier facing this, the WAAAGH is a weapon of psychological destruction. As the green tide approaches, this psychic field rolls ahead of them like a tsunami. It manifests as a palpable pressure in the skull of every human nearby. It induces migraines, nosebleeds, and a primal, shaking terror. It is the sound of a billion voices screaming inside your head, drowning out your training, your loyalty, and your sanity. Psyker reports describe the WAAAGH not as a clean energy, but as a dirty, roiling smog of soul energy. It drowns out the light of the Astronomicon. It creates a localized warp storm where the laws of causality start to break down. When you fight the Orks, you are fighting in a zone where reality has been rewritten by the crude desires of monsters. The air gets hotter, the shadows get longer, the noise becomes deafening, literally bursting eardrums before the first wave even hits the trench line. This is the weaponized insanity of the Greenskins. We are wading deep into the green tide now, and the noise is becoming deafening. The galaxy of the 41st millennium is filled with horrors that defy explanation. And to survive, you need more than a last gun. You need knowledge. That is what we provide here at Silent Imperium. We decode the nightmares so you can stare back at them. If you want to ensure your comms link remains open and you don't miss our future briefings on the Tyrannid hive mind or the dark secrets of the Inquisition, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell. Join us, survive the long night. Now, let us return to the walls. To truly grasp the scale of the Orc threat, we must look at a planetary siege. Let us take the War for Armageddon as our primary case study. Imagine living in a hive city, a mountain of steel and concrete, housing billions. When the Orcs arrive,
They do not arrive quietly. They arrive in rocks, literal asteroids, hollowed out, fitted with engines, and slammed into the planet's surface. This is not a precision orbital strike. It is an extinction-level event used as a landing craft. When the dust settles, the siege begins, but it is not a siege of patience or starvation like the Iron Warriors would conduct. It is a siege of noise. The first thing the defenders notice is the smell, a thick, choking miasma of unwashed bodies, fungal spores, and burning promethium that rises high enough to cloud the spire tops. Then comes the green sea. Looking down from the ramparts, you do not see the ground. You see a carpeting of green bodies stretching from the base of the wall to the horizon. Millions upon millions of boys chanting, firing weapons into the air, a restless ocean of violence waiting to crest. The horror of the siege is the relentlessness. Orks do not require supply lines in the traditional sense. They eat the fungus that grows from their own waste. They eat the dead. They eat the defenders they capture. They do not tire. They do not suffer from morale shock. In a typical siege, you break the enemy by making the cost of victory too high. But for the Orks, the cost is the reward. High casualties mean a good scrap. They will pile their own dead against the walls until the ramp is high enough to climb over. Defenders of Hive Hades reported that the sheer acoustic pressure of the Ork army caused structural damage to the lower levels. But the psychological toll is worse. There is no silence. Day and night, the chanting continues. The banging of scrap metal continues. It grinds down the human mind. Guardsmen have been known to jump from the walls simply to escape the anticipation of the inevitable wave. When the breach finally happens, it is not a tactical maneuver. It is a bursting dam of muscle and cleavers, drowning the corridors in blood within minutes.
This brings us to the most dangerous misconception about the Orks, the idea that they are funny. The internet culture surrounding Warhammer 40,000 often depicts Orks as lovable football hooligans, speaking in Cockney accents and engaging in slapstick violence. This meme is a filter that protects us from the grotesque reality. If you were to strip away the tabletop abstraction and stand before an Ork, you would not find anything to laugh at. An Ork is a 7-foot-tall biological killing machine with tusks the size of combat knives and the temperament of a rabid hound. But their true horror lies in their casual brutality. The Chaos Gods inflict pain because it feeds their patrons. The Dark Eldar torture because they need to consume suffering to survive. Orks torture because they simply do not care. They lack the capacity for empathy entirely. To an Ork, a human is not a sentient being with a soul, a family, or fear. A human is a runt, a plaything, or worse, cattle. The fate of those captured by Orks is rarely discussed because it is too grim for standard Imperial propaganda. Humans are rounded up into slave pens, stripped of their dignity, and forced to work in scrapyards until they drop dead from exhaustion. They are used as manual labor to haul ammunition, effectively helping the Orks kill their own kind. The runt herds, Orks tasked with managing slaves, treat humans with less regard than a farmer treats livestock. And when the work is done, or when the food supplies run low, the reality becomes even darker. Orks are omnivores. There are accounts of human populations on conquered worlds being kept in pens, bred, and harvested. It is a slaughterhouse industrialization of humanity. There is no malice in it, which makes it infinitely more terrifying. They don't hate you.
They just see you as meat that can hold a wrench for a few days before being thrown into the stew pot. This is the true face of the Xenos, a force that strips you of your humanity long before it ends your life.
Let us descend from the strategic view to the tactical nightmare. What is it actually like to stand in a trench line when the green tide hits? The first thing you realize is the sheer kinetic disparity. An Imperial Guardsman is a human being, perhaps malnourished, protected by flak armor that is mass-produced to the lowest bidder. An Ork boy is 600 pounds of corded muscle and bone, charging at 30 miles per hour. When the lines clash, it is not a battle. It is an industrial accident. Physics is not on your side. Reports from Armageddon describe the impact of an Ork charge as being similar to being hit by a light vehicle. Guardsmen are not just stabbed, they are broken, they are trampled. The Ork weapons, the choppers, are heavy, crude slabs of metal that do not cut so much as they shear. They rely on the brute force of the user to cleave through armor, flesh, and bone in a single overhead swing. And there is the smell. Veterans of the Ork Wars often speak of the smell before they speak of the sights. It is a concentrated stench of old blood, rotting meat, and aggressive spores that triggers a gag reflex instantly. In close quarters, this sensory assault is overwhelming. You are fighting a creature that is screaming directly into your face, spitting acidic saliva, its red eyes burning with a joy that you cannot comprehend. The most terrifying realization for a soldier in this moment is the uselessness of suppression. You fire your lasgun, you hit the target, you burn a hole in the Ork's chest, but he does not stop. He does not fall. He reaches you. The adrenaline and the WAAAGH energy sustain him past the point where a human would have died of shock. You are fighting a biological tank that hates you, and in those final seconds, you realize that for him, this is not a desperate struggle for survival. It is a game, and you are the toy.
But let us assume you survive. Let us assume the Astra Militarum holds the line, the Astartes drop from the sky, and the war boss is slain. The WAAAGH is broken, and the Greenskins scatter. You have won, correct? No. This is the cruelest joke of the Ork biology. Victory is a temporary illusion. Throughout the battle, every Ork that was wounded, every drop of blood that hit the soil, and every corpse left rotting in the no man's land has been releasing spores. These spores sink deep into the planetary crust, dormant and microscopic. They are the seeds of the next war. Weeks after the victory parades, strange mushrooms will begin to grow in the dark, damp corners of the battlefield. Then come the squigs, then the snotlings, and finally the feral Orks. A planet that has been touched by an Ork invasion is never truly clean again. It becomes a feral world, plagued by constant low-level insurgencies that can erupt into a full WAAAGH within a generation. The Imperium solution is often to burn everything. Flamer squads must scorch the earth. In extreme cases, the Inquisition may declare the biosphere compromised and order an exterminatus. Think about the tragedy of that. To defeat the Orks, you often have to destroy the very world you were trying to save. It is a war of attrition, where the enemy's ammunition is their own biology, and their recruitment pool is the dirt beneath your feet. You cannot win a war against a plague. You can only manage the symptoms until you run out of fuel. As we step back and look at the galaxy of the 41st millennium, a chilling thought begins to take shape. We, the players and the lore scholars, often debate who will win the setting. Will chaos consume reality? Will the Tyranids eat everything? Will the Necrons reclaim their empire? But there is a theory, whispered among the more nihilistic Xenos scholars, that the Orks have already won. Think about it. The Eldar are dying out, trapped in their grief. The Imperium is a rotting carcass, fueling itself on human sacrifice and misery. The Necrons are soulless automatons, waking to a dead galaxy. Everyone is suffering. Everyone is fighting against the dying of the light. Everyone except the Orks. For the Orks, the galaxy is not a grimdark hellscape. It is a paradise. It is full of enemies to fight, loot to steal, and noises to make. They do not know fear. They do not know despair. They are perfectly adapted to a universe of eternal war. As long as there is conflict, the Orks are happy. In a universe defined by suffering, the only ones having a good time are the monsters. And that perhaps is the most terrifying reality of all. The galaxy does not belong to the Emperor. It does not belong to the Chaos Gods. It belongs to the Green Tide. And we are just living on borrowed time before the final wave crashes down. I am the Silent Imperium. If you enjoyed this dive into the horror of the Xenos, verify your loyalty by liking this video. Tell me in the comments, which faction do you think truly owns the galaxy? Until next time, the Emperor protects, but the Orks are always watching.